Well, that got real. Hi, and welcome to Khyber Shards. This is another Khyber Shards Q&A episode. We are an actual play 5th edition show set in the Eberron campaign world, and I'm the game master, Philip. As you see, I'm alone, and that's because this is another Q&A episode, but I decided that since all the cast had done at least one, I'd give them all the week off and take on some more DM-focused questions and topics, and talk a little bit through my planning for the last few episodes, which, as I said, got real, guys. It got real. And at the table, too. Well, table, as it is. So, yeah. So this past few episodes surrounding the revelation of Donabella and her mark were pretty intense emotionally, probably more than I thought they were. In fact, going ahead and dealing with a couple of questions that were put out there. R.A., one of our cast members, asked, "Was the most surprising thing the players have thrown at you so far?" And Eric, not our player Eric, but one of our patrons, asked, "What were your expectations on how the characters reacted to the Donabella revelation, and what were your thoughts on how they actually reacted?" My answer to RA's question is Pog pulling his hair back and showing his mark in an attempt to calm down a little girl. That was entirely unforeseen. I did not anticipate that at all. And to Eric's question, what were my expectations? So one of the things that was suggested that would be fun for me to do here would be to talk through a bit of my planning for the game. And so to answer Eric's question, I want to talk through what I hoped to achieve, or what I hoped that the game would achieve. So, I mean, DMing's hard, right? You say DMing's hard. It's not to say I find the act of DMing difficult. I find it a whole lot of fun, but there's a lot of picky little details to it, You want to provide a lot of choice to the players, but if you just sit down, in most groups, if you just sit down and say, "Okay, guys, what do you want to do?" You get crickets. You have to provide some options. You have to provide a setting for a context for them to choose what to do, other than just, your average mundane things. I mean, there are games out there about mundane life, and D&D is just not really that. So you don't want to shoehorn your players into making particular decisions, but you also need to provide some stimulus. You need to provide some options and some context for them to make decisions in. And what I found myself with after we got to Stormreach was a group of people who had been in town for about 18 months, had managed to make lives for themselves, and were relatively content. And we could just leave them there, but that's not, a story without conflict isn't much of a story. So I needed to get some decisions to be made by the characters. I needed the characters to decide whether or not they were going to stay in Stormreach long term, whether Stormreach was now home, or whether it was just a stopping point, whether it was just a hiding place, and they were going to run at the drop of a hat. I needed to know whether they were going to just be regular old citizens of Stormreach, or whether they were going to decide to be active, to be heroes to a degree, to be adventurers at least. Heroes, we'll see. And I needed them to decide whether or not they were staying, ideally that they were staying together, right? Because one of the constant difficulties of this game is, why are these people hanging out with each other? Any D&D group, why are these player characters hanging out with one another as opposed to just going their separate ways? And especially when things are doing okay, everyone's doing all right. Ari's kind of doing his thing. I hesitate to call it a job, and I think Eric would agree with me there. Hesitate to call it a job, but he's got a thing he's doing. He's making a life. Shade is starting to make a living. Esri, likewise. Pog has what we would all call just a job. So everybody's got their basic needs met. So why are they just buddies? So that's what I wanted to achieve with this first arc that wasn't in any way prologue. This first arc that was genuinely sort of the incitement of our campaign, the inciting incidents of our campaign. I needed them to decide whether they're staying together, whether they're staying in Stormreach, and whether they're going to be active or passive, whether they're going to be adventurers or just everyday citizens. So that's what I was going for. So how to do that? So here's kind of where my thinking went. The first episode, our episode 5, I guess, Stormreach, which I would call the first episode of this arc. I wanted to know, because I had a pretty good idea, because I know the players well, and I'd gotten to know their characters over the sort of 4 episodes of prologue. I want to know what they're going to do when people are in danger. And I want there to be just sort of a fun combat. So I introduce the mummy fight. This tells us a bunch of things. It tells us that Stormreach is a weird place because a guy carted a mummy into town and it came to life and attacked his friends. So it tells us Stormreach is a weird place. It also gives us a chance, and gives me a chance, to find out what are the characters going to do in a crisis when people are in danger. And we saw very, very different reactions. The impetus, or the inclination of Esri and Shade is avoid conflict. The impetus of Ari and Pog is to move towards, not necessarily towards conflict, but towards danger, towards adventure, out of different motivations. Ari, I think Ari views himself in slightly more heroic terms than some of the characters, in the sense of, danger, innocence in danger, I'll do something. Justice to be done, right? And evil to be wrong, or wrong to be righted, I mean. And from Pog's perspective, we've seen Colin talk plenty about this. Pog is looking to be a hero. He's looking for a life of adventure. Whereas Esri and Shade are kind of trying to go under the radar a little bit more. Shade's just not succeeding very well, and Esri's friends are not succeeding very well. So the mummy fight tells me a few things. It tells me the group isn't, as a whole, isn't just going to stand by and let innocents be harmed, but that they're not necessarily going around looking to right the wrongs of the world. They are somewhat reluctant adventurers. So that's what I learned. And also, it's just a lot of fun. It was a fun fight. I sort of just scaled down the powers of a mummy because, of course, a mummy would be way beyond what the player characters were ready for at that level. So I just scaled it down in terms of hit points and in terms of its, and didn't give it access to all of its abilities. So I just took that down a notch, and that was fun. It also gave me a chance to introduce a couple of fun NPCs. We got to meet Zotz, who was one of the NPCs that Colin had chosen as having a negative relationship with. And we got to meet Solarka, who both Colin and Casey chose as a character that as an NPC their character had a positive relationship with. And we got to meet Hallis Martain. Hallis Martain comes from the Eberron campaign guide from way back in 3.5 days, and is just a fun character to have. So that's what I learned. So Next thing is we need to up the ante a little bit. The crisis needs to be a little more. It's not just anyone's in danger. It's someone very specific is in danger. And usually a good bet is a child. Most people are not going to walk by a child in danger. And depending on your group, this is something you be careful with, because for some people this can be really distressing. And I feel pretty confident in my knowledge of the group, but also in thinking about audience and that sort of thing. I didn't want this to be, weird or truly alarming. And so funny danger, right? I mean, actually your kitchen coming to life and trying to kill you is a horrifying thought, but forks and he sat chasing a little girl through the marketplace. This a funny bit. So the introduction of Donabella and the discovery of her mark. So what I wanted this to do is I wanted this to put their quiet, relatively quiet life in Stormreach in danger. We established early in our planning sessions that they weren't going to start out as an adventuring party. They were going to know each other, they were going to be connected to each other, but they were going to have relatively normal jobs. So that needed to be interrupted. Otherwise, well, that's just not going to be a dramatic story. It's not going to be a story with conflict. So we needed to interrupt that. We needed to provide some conflict. And that's what Donabella does. Donabella is a bomb thrown into their daily lives because it's a problem they can't just move on from. I knew rough outlines of what happened when each of the characters' marks manifested, and that's something I want to explore in campaign, and actually almost did in the most recent episode. I'll talk about that here in a second. But I know those things, and I know the circumstances of it, so I knew this would not be something they could just move past. And so that's what my goal was with introducing Donabella, was to force them to disrupt their quiet lives and force them to decide, give them a reason to run if they wanted to run. Give them the option to run. Now, Donabella's an NPC I wanted to introduce, and she's more developed than that. She wasn't just a plot device. But that's how I sort of thought about it in planning terms. Now that brings us to the moment of revelation and what did I expect? I thought that upon discovering the mark, the players would return her to her house, turn her over to her mom, who would arrive shortly. Her mom arrived a little bit later because things took a turn, but who was intended to arrive quite quickly. Turn her over to her mom, and then hightail it out. I assume they would want to get out of that situation as fast as they could so that they're not implicated in whatever comes next. Well, instead, Pog shows off his mark. I was taken entirely off guard by that. That was entirely surprising. That's the answer to RA's question. And to Eric's, I was taken entirely off guard. I had no idea. It did never occur to me that's how they would handle it. At least not immediately. I thought eventually, yes, but I kind of thought what it would go down would be they would go home and figure out what they wanted to do, and then make that approach, come at it from that angle, more gently, more gradually, more diplomatically. None of them were diplomatic. Obviously, Ari thinks he was, and Shade and Pog don't care that they weren't, because they were concerned about Donabella not being diplomatic, and likewise Esri. Ari thinks he was diplomatic, but there's just no diplomacy to you come home and there are 4 strangers in your home with your daughter. There's just no diplomacy to that. There's no way that you can talk yourself out of that situation, but you don't get to hang around and make a thing of it. It's we helped your daughter out and we're now leaving. Now I'm glad she's fine. Like, that's the only way that situation ended diplomatically, is if they had immediately turned her over to mom's care and excused themselves. since none of them tried to do that, it wasn't going to be a diplomatic encounter. So, my thoughts on how it actually played out. I feel like it was true to the characters. Pog is not planning. Pog is not a planner. Pog reacted to the situation. He wanted, I think, in the moment, what Pog was representing is he wanted Donabella to know she wasn't alone. I don't think he realized she didn't know. He wanted Donabella to know she wasn't alone. That wasn't a wise decision, but it was a true decision to who Pog is. And I think everybody's was. Ari, the mom, will know best. You know, mom arrived and Ari wanted to be more involved, I think, but once it became clear that wasn't an option, Ari was, you know, yeah, mom's got this. It's mom's choice. And that's because his experience of manifestation was very different from Esri, Shade, and Pog's. So, for all of them, we need to make sure she's okay. And who has, you know, legal custody over this situation is not a relevant factor. So I think all of them acted really true to their characters, which, considering the wild situation I threw at them, I'm really impressed that all of them were able to very quickly work out what their character would do with this and react in a way that just made so much sense. You know, we play a lot, you know, when you play D&D, a lot of times you think back and you're like, that's not how I would do that. I've done that on Eberron Renewed a lot, with Eris. Different scenes where she's encountered different people and I've had her react certain ways, and I think back later, you know, that wasn't quite right. And as a DM, do that all the time. And I played a session of my home game last night, and afterwards I was thinking, you know, that's not quite how that NPC should have expressed themselves. And so, you know, you think back to that, and I was just really impressed that it doesn't seem to me like there's any room for that. These reactions were great. So I was thrilled with the way the role-playing went. But no, that was not at all what I expected. So Donabella throws a bomb into their quiet lives. And then, having talked with the players a little bit about what their characters were likely to do between recording sessions, just to get an idea of what I needed to prep, it became evident that the group was going to kind of scatter, because Shade was going to want to make sure nothing happened back at the Bright Doom house. Pog and Esri were going to want to get home. Ari was going to want to go to a bar. So they were going to scatter. So I needed to introduce some more things, because I knew that conversation needed to happen. I knew that they needed to have a chance to decide, okay, what happens now? We've just revealed ourselves. Do we run? Because that's obviously the thing that makes the most sense. And we see that a little bit in the most recent episode. Do we run? We've just badly endangered our situation here. Do we run now, or do we wait to see whether she calls the watch, whether she calls the houses, whether Mrs. Bright Doom, who I didn't get a chance to get her first name out. She has a first name. It'll come out. Where Ma Bright Doom didn't, what she will do. And since we don't know that, they needed a chance to talk about that. So I didn't plan a lot for the next session. I kind of wanted to give them room to work out what they were going to do. That was my hope. Which comes to Richard's question: did you plan on the cast plunging into their own discussions on the last episode, or was that just a pleasant surprise? I had a couple of things planned if they came to a consensus really fast, but I expected that I would need to give them at least the first episode of the recording session. I would need to give them at least the first episode to work out what they were doing. And as it happens, it carries into the next episode a little bit as well. So, yeah, I kind of expected that they would plunge into their own discussion, but maybe not to the extent that they did, and I loved it. It was great. Anytime the players are just happy to go on role playing without needing any stimulus, without needing any push towards a situation, that's great. As a DM, I love it. So I was very happy to just let them run as long as they needed to, and I think we got some amazing characterization out of the little end scene with Shade and Pog. Oh, it was so good. I loved it. I had spoken to Colin because I knew he had a very clear idea of what happened when Pog's mark manifested. And I said, I want to use this as an opportunity to do a little flashback to that. And I was getting ready to do it when he started describing what Pog does in his room. Like when he goes and he sits down and he takes out the little totem piece of cloth and considers it. And it was just such a beautiful little scene, and gave just dropped enough little breadcrumbs that I decided anything I do here is going to mess that up. It was just such a beautiful little moment, so I just left it alone, and we'll do a flashback another time, you know. So that was they created better TV. I don't know. They created a better scene, a more beautiful scene than I could have possibly done. So I was very happy to just let them play. However, as part of that conversation, we get the reintroduction of Tommel and Falco. I was actually pretty hesitant about introducing two old NPCs in a single session. Old NPCs, as if we've been playing this for a really long time. Two NPCs from their past in a single session. I thought it might feel like a little rushed, and maybe it did. You know, that's in the eye of the beholder, so maybe you felt it was rushed. I was a little nervous about that. The reason I did it, here's why I did it. Tommel and Falco provide two very different things. Falco highlights the threat. They just revealed themselves, and they need to talk about what they're going to do about that. And Falco highlights that threat. He makes that threat very real, because here's someone who might know them, right? Who might conceivably remember them. I mean, not necessarily. You know, Falco trained a lot of people. He was the combat trainer, so maybe not. But he might conceivably. He's someone who knows their faces, or maybe not knows their faces. He's someone who has encountered them and could know who they are. So that heightens that threat. It puts the spotlight on that threat, so that they're going to have to decide: are we running, or is this home, and we're going to stay and fight for it? That's the conversation I wanted to sort of require with Falco, as well as setting up. I mean, obviously, I've introduced Falco because I'm setting up some other things that will happen later, but I wanted that threat to become very real, so that they would have to decide as player characters how they're going to approach it, how they're going to deal with it. Are they going to, I mean, I think Ari suggested we could just go kill him. You know, he's getting drunk at a bar, he's not in his armor, we could just go kill him. And I was ready for that. I have stats for Falco. So if they were gonna go throw down with him, I was ready for that potentiality. I didn't really expect that to happen, but I was prepared in case. It's always good to be prepared just in case. If you're going to introduce someone the players don't really like, you should always be prepared for the possibility, even if it's an unlikely one, that they just try to kill him. So Falco highlights the threat. Tommel, on the other hand, provides an interest. Tommel provides a curiosity, gives them a thing to chase in Stormreach. So if they decide to stay, they have this thing they can go in and investigate and find out more about. Tommel also, being based on who he's with, which we will learn later, also brings some potential for conflict. But so Falco gives them a reason to run, Tommel gives them a reason to stay, and that's what I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out, are they going to stay, or go? Are they going to stay together or not? Are they going to be adventurers or not? And what I got was, when push comes to shove, however reluctantly, they're going to step up to protect innocents, particularly other people who are like them or who are comparatively helpless. Donnabella's a kid, and Donnabella's like they were. They were all where Donnabella is at one point. And so we learned that they are willing to step up and do something and be heroic. Step into the line of danger. We learned that they're going to stay together. It could be a scatter sort of moment, but all of the conversation back at the treehouse revolves around staying. We're going to stay together. We're going to work with each other. And they're going to stay in Stormreach. Or that's where they're leading. I guess I'm not 100% sure. That you're never really 100% sure. They could have been, eventually, the threat could build to a point where they just decide, let's blow this popsicle stand, man. But I think, at least for now, at least in the short term, they're staying. So that's what I wanted. Those are sort of the decision points I wanted to achieve with the arc surrounding Donnabella, and why I planned the revelations that I did so close to proximity. I know it might have felt a little rushed, and I was very cognizant of that and very kind of nervous about that. But I hope that what it did actually is just give us a good, solid moment for character revelation. I'm not sure character development is what took place, but character revelation, a revealing of what the characters' motives are going to be like and what they are like as people. So that's kind of my planning process, and a few answers in the process. We got a few other questions that I want to go through in this little Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up. So Richard also asks, can you expand a bit more on the Black Wheel program and its history in Eberron, and what made you choose it as a launch pad for this campaign? Yeah, so the Black Wheel program comes from this book, City of Stormreach, where it's the Black Wheel Company, not the Black Wheel program. And in City of Stormreach, it's presented as a professional adventuring guild that their thing is they will take any job, no matter how dangerous. And they are associated with the houses. Not quite as closely as I have made them, but they are associated with the houses. So I took that and I reimagined it as, what if instead of it being an adventuring guild that has become associated with the houses, what if it starts out by the houses? What if it is the houses program? What if, because this presents it as an adventuring guild that's kind of like contracted permanently to the 12s or on permanent retainer, but what if that's a lie? Eberron is a great setting for conspiracy theories. What if that's a lie? What if the Black Wheel Company is the personal military, the private military of the 12? And I liked that idea, and so I decided to run with it and sort of retroactively reconsider it as, what would the houses be doing? What would the houses be trying to get away with during the war? And if they could create a apparently legitimate adventuring guild, they could take advantage of the chaos and go and acquire strategic materials or dig into ancient sites that they don't normally have access to without the consent of the various sovereign nations, So that's what I was going for. The Black Wheel program's history in Eberron really is, as far as I can tell, limited to the City of Stormreach book, where it is a no job too difficult, no job too dangerous adventuring company that is contracted to the 12. So I've reimagined it as being created by the 12, with the contracted to probably just being a cover story. I don't want to get into where is the Black Wheel program now in our game, because the last thing we saw of it was being apparently shut down. So Was it shut down? Has it moved to something else? Is it the Weapon X program where it's like been restarted somewhere? That kind of thing. And I don't want to get into that, partly because I'm not totally sure where that's going to go yet. It will kind of depend on what the players latch onto. Yeah, it'll kind of depend on what the players latch onto in terms of how the game runs. So yeah, that's that. I will happily take more questions regarding history and lore if there are any follow-up questions, and maybe do another one of these later. But for the moment, that's a basic rundown of where it comes from and where you can find it if you want to use it. It's a pretty cool little organization. Their headquarters is essentially a helicarrier, which is pretty awesome. So check that out if you've got access to City of Stormreach, either online. It's one of the more expensive books to find physically anymore, because it is, in my opinion, the best setting book outside of like the actual campaign guide, like as a sort of micro setting book. It's real close between that and Sharn City of Towers, but City of Stormreach is just really, really good at providing a cool adventuring setting, a lot of useful NPCs, as well as quite a lot of adventure hooks. So if you are running an Eberron game or interested in Eberron lore, and you don't have access to City of Stormreach, I know you can get it on the DM's Guild, and you can probably find used copies of it if you can get lucky at a used bookstore. Mine was a Christmas present from my wonderful wife, Kelly, who bought me it despite it being like an $80 RPG book. All right. As to why I chose it for a launch pad for the campaign, I wanted a secret program, and I thought that the Black Wheel Company would be a good canon thing that I could take and repurpose for that, especially with this association with the houses. So that's more or less what I was going for. Laura asked, what's the longest it's ever taken you to plan a single session? That's a good question. I would say sorry, shouldn't put my hand in front of my face while I'm doing this. I would say the session I took the longest to plan was the finale battle of my Mummy's Mask campaign, my home game that ended about a year ago. And that's because it was going to be a multi-stage, massive combat encounter, and I really wanted it to be an interesting combat encounter, and so I really tried to put a lot of work into making the environment interesting, designing the enemy they were going to fight, and providing a lot of fun elements to play around with, and to make it difficult and challenging and interesting, even for very high level characters. So that's probably the one that took me the longest. I don't know how long it would have taken me. It took me. I was working on it I worked on the session over the course of months, probably. But how long was actually sitting down planning? I don't know. If I was just gonna, this is a wild guess, 5-6 hours of actual sitting and thinking about it. But sometimes while doing other things, like if you count the mini painting for that encounter, then it's dozens of hours, because I bought and painted a really, really excellent complex mini, which I think you can find pictures of in our Discord. If not, ask me in the Khyber Shards channel on our Discord, and I'll throw up a picture of it. I think I posted pictures of it while I was working on it. So that it gets big, but I don't really count that exactly as session planning. So that's probably the longest I've taken to plan a single session. Most of the time my planning is pretty short. The whole Bright Doom Revelation session is this page of my of my campaign notebook and a few notes on the back page. So I try not to overplan. I try to keep my notes pretty basic bullet points and usually a lot of marginal notes of things that I ought to think about ahead of time. So yeah, usually my planning is done mostly in the back of my head while I'm doing other things, and then I'll sit down for an hour, maybe two, to actually put the thoughts down into a form that I can follow while running the session. But occasionally, I'm pressed for time and I don't get to that part, and it's just a work off the couple of things I jotted down right before the game started, and what I had in my head. For the session after the revelation, where it was mostly the talking, or where a good bit of it was talking, my notes are much more sparse. So yeah, so usually I'm planning for an hour or two for a 4-hour session, usually closer to an hour of actual like sitting down and working on it. Most of my planning, as I say, is while I'm doing something else, which I'm sure is true for a lot of people when you're planning something that's mostly involving creativity. So yeah, that's my answer there. I'm kind of a long way around. Laura also asks, did you know you wanted to have an X-Men game from the start, or were there any other ideas you pitched the players and they liked this the best? I did have a couple of other ideas. One of them was, I knew that I kind of wanted them to be a part of a secret organization of some kind. But I began by asking them about tone. So one of the other pitches I had that I didn't pitch in detail because it became very clear from what their answers were when I asked about tone that this would not work. But I had a pitch based kind of loosely off the concept of the Old Guard movie on Netflix, of these, constantly reanimating or reincarnating soldiers, to say that what you have is a special forces unit in the Karnathi military, and they are, through a special necromantic ritual that is being performed at Fort Bones or Atur, they're not zombies or skeletons, they're revenants. Is that somehow Karnath has learned to create revenants from dead soldiers. And so you are this squad of revenant soldiers in the Karnathi military who, essentially, you can't die. Every time you die, you come back. And I thought that would be really fun to explore. I also had an idea of them being Irani elf revenants who are part of something like the Death Watch or something like. I'm trying to remember there's an organization that hunts undead among the Iranian. The name is slipping my mind right now. But so that was an option. That would have been a much darker, more military campaign. And when I asked them what kind of campaign they liked the idea of, I very quickly drew the conclusion that they wouldn't be very interested in a military campaign. So I didn't pitch that one. I pitched this, and I offered a vague outline of a couple of things, and I got from most of them, "You want to play X-Men with us?" And that was an immediate yes. So they pretty quickly latched onto this and liked this idea quite a bit. My initial idea for the campaign had them spending more of the campaign in the program, doing missions for the program. But based on our talk through the planning session, I got the impression they were more interested in being regular people forced to be heroes or forced to be adventurers rather than being professionals. And so I kept them in training and had them forced out of the program very early. So that's kind of how we came to this. But I knew I kind of wanted the superpowers game quite early. And the pitch of everyone has an aberrant mark was there pretty early. Pretty much as soon as I discarded my everyone's a revenant idea. So, and Irene asks, why do you put out awesome content faster than I can consume it in time to ask intelligent questions? Thanks for calling it awesome, you know? And you don't have to ask intelligent questions. We'll take dumb questions. But yeah, so that's, I don't know how to answer that. Because we want to provide cool content. So I'm glad you think it's cool and excellent, and I hope you will be able to, at your own pace and at your own leisure, catch up and enjoy what there is of Khyber Shards. So yeah, that about wraps it up. That's all of the questions that we have for today. And I hope you've enjoyed this. This ran a little longer than our usual Q&A, but I wanted to talk through some of that planning because that was a request. We're going to keep doing these Q&As. Let us know what other things you'd like to see. We're going to keep narrative stuff, role-playing in the main episodes. So I don't want to use these for downtime episodes or do reduced size one player role-playing thing. I want to keep the narrative in the main story, in the main episodes. But you want more Eberron lore dives, you want more DM Q&As, you want me to talk about planning sessions. What would you like to see us do? Let us know in the comments. We hope you really like what we're doing. We are having a blast doing it. So if you also like it, that's just, man, that's gravy. We're having a blast doing it. We're going to keep doing it. But we really hope you also are enjoying it. If you are, we'd love it if you would. It would really help us out if you would like and subscribe and throw a comment in there. We know every creator asks that stuff, and it's because, you know, we got to feed the algorithm. But we also really would like to hear what you think. I know we have our Discord, and if you want to be on our Discord, the link to that is in the description of this video, as well as on our website, thegeekpantheon.com. And so we do a lot of conversation over in the Discord, but we'd love to get to know those of you who are not there, who don't feel like joining there. So give us a comment. Let me know what you'd like to use these little Friday episodes for, and how we can keep making it better. If you really like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/thegeekpantheon. All that money, all that money, it's not a giant amount of money, but all the money that we receive from our extremely generous patrons, who we constantly are just baffled by why people are giving us money for this, but we really appreciate it. All that money has gone into technical improvements, for our various audio and video setups, for Eric's editing software, for server space, for subscriptions to various services like Riverside FM, which is what we use to record, and we're really liking that system. So all of that is just put right back into the show, into shows we do and the podcasts. So if you want to support us and help us make the show better, please head over to patreon.com/thegeekpantheon and think about supporting us there at one of the various tiers that we've got there. We've got a push going for 2,000 subscriptions to the Geek Pantheon YouTube channel. If we do that, Eric will do a giveaway for for a D&D hardcover book. Any of the books. I don't know that he's got a plan for which one or if you're going to get to pick, but we'll do a drawing, and you can have a chance to win a D&D book. So like, subscribe, comment, and you can follow us on all our social media, which are all in the description. Anyway, I'm really bad at these outros, and I'm already rambling, so I don't know. I hope this was interesting. I hope it wasn't excessively boring, but I'm sorry if it was. Anyway, this has been Khyber Shards. Thanks for watching it. I'm Philip, and I'll see you next time. See ya.